Interesting Gemara. It seems like quite a common theme among Nazir is that Tosfos' pshat very often does not follow the simple version of the Gemara or the Girsa text that we have.
Oh,
And yesterday was an example of that, and today we'll have another example. It's interesting, there's this long, massively long Tosfos here. You see at the bottom of Chavav, it's almost a full Amud long. And Tosfos over there basically acknowledges limitations in his explanation and then goes with a simple version. So yesterday we learned Tosfos' explanation, so we'll probably have to explain it and then understand why Tosfos prefers the alternative. Being that that is the case, I think I may be switching as a general rule that when Tosfos explains the Gemara in a way which seems to deviate dramatically from the text, which we've had over the past few days quite a few times, I think I might switch to the Rosh's pshat as the preferred pshat.
Oh.
So we'll see how that goes going forward. Anyway, be that as it may,
where are we again?
we're on Chavav Amud Beis. I'll review a little bit, and we are at we're at Amar Le Rav Simi Barashi, so it's about 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Second word on the line. Amar Le Rav Simi Barashi. So let's review a little bit. We learned that there's the idea of Mois Stumin and Mois Mefuroshin. The guy, in the Mishnah, typically we're talking about a woman. She pledged to become a Nazir. She prepared to end her Naziris. Her husband found out about it and ended her Naziris for her by nullifying it. So she can no longer bring her karbanis. We said it depends on how the money, what exactly she separated. If she separated a pile of money and said, this should be for my karbanis, for my sacrifices, that's called moed stumin. And we either have a gzeras hakasav, an indication in the Torah, or it's a halacha l'mashim Sinai, it's an oral tradition. Then in that scenario, even though the karbanis sacrifices that the Nazir brings includes chatas, oila, and shlamim, and typically a chatas that cannot be brought typically is killed. In this case, a unique circumstance, we say that everything is brought as a korban oila for an oilas kayetz mizbeach. Okay, that is limited to the scenario of mois stumin, where the money is unspecified. The Gemara says if it's mois mifurashin, let's say the money is specified, or alternatively there is no chatas money there. So, for example, she separates a korban chatas and $1,000, right? So that $1,000 is now split. 50% of it is brought as an oila, 50% of it's brought as a shlomim, because that's what it would have been brought otherwise. And oila and shlomim are boys nidovel. It can be brought as a voluntary gift as opposed to chatas, which cannot. Okay, 1 second. Okay, the Gemara continued. So what exactly does mifurashin mean? So obviously the most mifurish would be to take, 3 piles of $300 and say this one's going to be buying me a sheep for chatas, oil and shlam. Also, like we said before, chatas is a female lamb, oil is a male lamb, and 1 second, oil is a male, chatas is a female lamb, and shlamim is a mature female. Sorry, 1 second, I did that right. Right? Not sure. I think so. Yeah. Shlom and Ayla are
Was a male.
Shlom and what's it called? Shlom and Chatas are both females. Asham and Ayla are males. But Shlom could be older. Okay. So we had a few extensions of the concept of Mifurashim. Now, it's interesting to note that there's a major debate here. We went with Tosfos pshat yesterday. We'll review Tosfos, and then we'll explain what the alternative is, and we'll stick with the alternative because that's what Tosfos himself does. Okay. So again, mifurashim, obviously the most mifurish is when you have 3 different sacrifices. Also mifurish is where you have 3 different piles of money. Each pile is specified for different sacrifice. Okay. Then the Gemara had other examples of mifurashim. 1 second. The Gemara says that specifically, hold on. Let's say a guy is so as follows. Let's say a guy says that an oila, he has a cow in front of him. Cow is not kosher for an oila. You need a bull to be an oila. And it's got to be a young one. He has a cow in front of him and says this cow should be an oila. This is called makdish nekeva l'oila. He sanctifies a female animal for korban oila. The law is the animal is sanctified. You obviously you can't bring it as a korban oila because it doesn't fit the bill, and you have to wait until it gets a mum, and then you sell it, and with the money you bring your korban oila. Similarly, if a guy sanctifies three cows or 3 bulls and says these should be the karbonis of Nazir, in that scenario, it's called mifaroshin. Even though you can't actually bring a cow or a bull for a Nazir, all the sacrifices are sheep, either lambs or rams, but no bull, no cattle. That's for sure. So, despite that, the animals are still sanctified and they're considered specified. Why are they considered specified? According to Tosfos, and this is the theme according to Tosfos in the Gemara, is that because you cannot use them immediately, in other words, you have to yira achi stove, you're going to let them pasture until they develop a mum. So therefore, we're concerned that during the waiting period, you're going to specify which to which. Therefore, an animal which is liquid, such as, let's say, instead of the guy sanctifying 3 bulls, he does 3 sheep, but all of them have a broken leg, or a cut on the lips, right? That also works. So they're all bali mumen. Cannot bring any of them as a sacrifice because they're all bali mumen. Therefore, they can be sold immediately. They are not sanctified because they're blemished. They're not sanctified. They can be sold immediately. If they can be sold immediately, that's called stumen. Okay. The Gemara gave 2 other examples of, in other words, so where the item is sort of liquid, you can sell it immediately. That's called stumen. It's only when it's going to take a long delay to get the right item that it's called mifarashim. And according to Tosfos, it's sort of exera. We're concerned that even though 3 cows, you didn't specify any of them, they're all going to be sold and use the money to buy the sacrifices. We're concerned because you're waiting so long, you're going to end up specifying them. Okay, now, like we said, according to Tosfos, this means that anything that has an illiquid market, it takes a while to sell, is in the same category. So the Gemara included not just money and not just animals in what's considered mifarashim, but also bars of metal, what they call bullion, and beams. This guy has like lots of wood. What?
Beams and bullion.
Beams and bullion. So those examples are things that are considered mifarashim. Mifarashim meaning that the items can go to the Dead Sea, go to the Mediterranean, basically, and they do not. The money doesn't go to Oilas Kaitzim's back. Okay, just starting the Gemara right now. All of that was back up.
Page what?
Page Chafaf and Beis 26b.
26b, and we're on 26.
7 lines in the bottom of the page. Amar layer of Simi. First one of the line is lay. Okay, so see the Gemara. It's a short Gemara. Maybe we'll continue to the next to Chafkas. Maybe not. We'll see where we're holding. Those are all critical. So again, I'm saying before we start, one more thing. Okay, that is all in Tosfos' opinion. According to Tosfos' opinion, something that's unspecified but has an illiquid marketplace, and it takes a while to dispose of the item, transact the asset, it's considered mifarashim, sort of exera. It's a rabbinical decree because we're concerned that during the time frame, he may end up specifying which is the chatas. So it's sort of exera. Okay, that is all in Tosfos' opinion, and that's how Tosfos learns the Gemara. And now, because if you look at these, I mentioned before, there's a very large Tosfos bottom of Chafaf and Beis. It's over an amud long. It's a very long Tosfos. Tosfos eventually rejects his explanation in favor of the alternative, which is the explanation of the grandson of Rashi on the side of the page. It's a very simple explanation. According to Rashi, it's very simple. The halacha l'maisha misinai, there's an oral tradition that if it's mo'is stumen, if it's money that's unspecified, and it has to be very similar to money. Things that aren't similar to money are not included in the law, and therefore you don't treat them as being sent to Kayetzim's Be'ach. So things that are close analogs of money are treated like money. Things that are not are not. It's that simple. It's not exera because somebody might actually make it mefaroshin. It's that stumen is exeris akosov or halacha l'meshim Sinai, and you have to determine something is stumen. If it's not stumen, then it automatically is mefaroshin. So items that are very similar to money, such as animals that are bali mumen, blemished animals, which are going to be sold immediately, they're considered like money. And things that are not transacted easily are not considered like money. Things like bars of metal, wooden beams, or animals that are fit for sacrifice. Okay. That being said, we can begin the Gemara. Amar le Rav Simi Barashi Rav Papa. Rav Simi Barashi says to Rav Papa, "My tamayu d'Rabbanan." What's the reason of the rabbis? The Amri Mois v'loy behema v'loy naska. It has, in order to define, again, we're going to prefer here Rashi's pshat, or whatever, the grandson of Rashi's pshat, as opposed to Taisus, because Taisus himself prefers it. So it's interesting. Taisus doesn't even tell us it to you. He doesn't tell it to you until you get to the end of the Gemara, because all the Taisus beforehand, he just says it as if it's the most obvious thing is his explanation, and then eventually he gives up in his explanation, goes to the alternative. Okay. Again, so the reason we're going not with Taisus the way we learned yesterday, the way I explained at the beginning. We're going to switch over to the Rifun, which is Taisus's preference at the end of the sugya as follows. Why do the rabbis say specifically money and not things that aren't like money? Things like animals that are fit for sacrifice, or beams or bars. Those things are called mifuroshin. Only money or bali mumen, blemished animals, are considered stumen, and that means the money goes to us kayetz mizbeach. Elameat, if that's the case, so mois v'loy oifus. We should say that money is considered specified, but not birds. Okay, so there are a number of situations, scenarios which require a person to bring a pair of birds. Mitzvah is in that category. He brings a pair of two birds for sacrifice. Some of the tumah hayetzim and aguf is like that, and also he nazir that becomes tummy brings two birds, one animal. Okay, so when you bring these two birds, what the halacha is that not only what would seem is that it would seem that stumen means specifically money or blemished animals, but animals that are fit for sacrifice are not considered stumen; they're considered mefaroshin. So therefore, it should be the case that two birds, you need to specify which bird is which. One of the birds is going to be an aylo, one of them is going to be a chatos. So let's say you'll say, okay, indeed, you're right, that every time somebody brings birds, two birds, he needs to specify at the time of sale which is which. You'll say that that's the case. Rav Chisda did not teach that way. He taught the birds can remain unspecified either until the point where the owner buys them, the guy who needs the atonement buys them, or until the kohen performs a sacrifice. Ask the Gemara, Amai, Hamois Kamirila. The oral tradition is that only money could remain unspecified, but animals need to be specified. So why is it that the kohen, he has two birds in a cage, he takes one bird out, he said, okay, you know what, this one will be the ayla. One second, which one is it? Is it the ayla or is it the chatos? How could it remain unspecified if we only know the tradition of the lack of specification as it pertains to money? Now, it could be that indeed the halacha of stumen is much more than just money. It was only yesterday where we saw everybody putting these limitations on what stumen is. Maybe stumen means animals too. The question is specifically on these opinions that said, no, stumen is only money. Unspecified can only be referring to money. What do you mean can only refer to money? Rav Chisda said it could be referring to birds. It's not just limited to money. Okay, hold on a second. Just make sure I have this right. Okay. And moreover, another point Tosfos brings out is that according to Rav Chisda, it would seem, let's say he's a mitzvah, he has these two birds in the cage. The kohen is about to perform the sacrifice, and he dies. What do you do with the two birds? You bring them as oilus kayas in his bath. They're stumen. So it should have the same law. It should have the same law as stumen, because the kohen didn't specify it yet. He didn't pull out the bird and decide which one's the chatas, which one's the oilah. So therefore, it's considered stumen. You see that a live bird that's fit for sacrifice is considered stumen. Okay, so what's the alternative? The alternative is to say that indeed, you're right, it's possible for an animal to be stumen. Okay, so that's what, in other words, the Gemara seems to prefer that alternative. The first, in other words, yesterday we learned that stumen is all of a sudden this limited category. It only refers to money. Ask the Gemara, it doesn't only refer to money, it also refers to animals. So the Gemara's response is, okay, fine. So you want to say that all animals can be stumen. Hold on a second. According to that reason, we're on top of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. First line, second to last word. A guy brings 3 animals for a one second. For a Nazir. He brings a ram and a female lamb and a male a male lamb, female lamb, and a female a mature female. You. 1 second. Make sure I have that right. Hold on. Just give me a moment about that. Just want to check. Just want to make sure I have the fact correct here. There we are. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Okay. A shlom could be brought from either male or female. So over here you have a situation where the guy has 3 animals. He has 2 lambs, one's male, one's female. And he also has a mature male, or for that matter, a mature female, which cannot be brought for chatos or for an oilah. In that case, it's obvious that the oilah and the chatas can only be brought. The oilah obviously is only, so again, the guy has 3 animals: an immature, a premature, a lamb that's male, a lamb that's female, and a ram. The lamb and a ram. The lamb that's male is the only carbon that the oilah could be is that carbon, is that animal. The only animal the chatas could be is the lamb that's a female, and therefore it's logical, presumably, that the ram is going to be the carbon shlomim. Okay, so Reb Shimon Gamliel says if you have 3 such animals, so then automatically we presume haru'uya lechatas, the one that's fit for chatas, meaning the female lamb, taker of chatas, should become a chatas. The one that's fit to be an oilah, which is the male lamb, taker of oilah, should be brought as an oilah. And the remaining ram, l'shlomim, taker of shlomim, should be brought as shlomim. So Gemara says, "Amai ha'amrit behem alavkim mefarashes damya." 1 second. Okay. Okay, so the Gemara wants to know that if the concept of stumin exists for animals as well, then why is it that the kohen could automatically decide which one is brought as which sacrifice? If as long as until even though it's obvious which one it's going to be, but the owner would have to specify which is which. And the fact that each one is only fit for one category shouldn't make a difference. Amarle, so he respond. 1 second. Amarle. So 1 second. Hold on. So see where actually responds for Papa. Amarle hasam v'lokach v'asa amar achmana. Iba kichas ba'alam iba siyas kain. Hachanami. 1 second. Hold on. Okay, so response is as follows. So again, so let's go through the order here. So we have all these opinions that say that stumin is a very limited category, right? Stumin is only money and basically nothing else, right? Animals or bullion or beams are not stumin. As for Simi Barashi, if that's the case, then birds shouldn't either be stumin, but we find that birds are stumin. Right? Because birds, we said that the guy could bring 2 birds in a cage, and the kohen pulls one out and decides if it's a chatas or an oila. Not only does he decide, he actually does. He makes it into chatas or an oila, whichever service he decides to perform. Okay, so that was Rav Simi's question to Rav Papa. Rav Papa says back to Rav Simi, he says, "Hold on a second, isn't there a difference?" I'm sorry. Okay, so what do you prefer saying? You prefer saying that animals are stumin. In other words, so you're preferring an opinion that stumin is actually not a limited category. Stumin is actually a very expansive category. It includes almost everything, including live animals, right? So 2 birds. In other words, if you're arguing that 2 birds should be called stumin, so you're effectively saying that animals that are ready to be sacrificed should be called stumin. But if that's the case, then why is it if a guy brings 3 animals that we know exactly what the 3 are? why don't we say that it's stumen? You have to wait for the owner to go ahead and tell you which is which, even though it's obvious which one's going to be which, but still should have to tell you. So Rav Sim bar Ashi responds to Rav Papa, no. In other words, my question is still better than your answer. And why is that? Because the Torah says, the Torah says that the guy is going to bring the two birds in the cage. The Kayan either v'lokach, meaning either when the guy buys the animals, buys the birds, he'll put them in two separate cages and designate one's the oila, one's the shlomim. Or alternatively, v'asa, the Kayan will perform as an oila or as a shlom. So the Kayan is the one who will specify it. So Torah clearly indicates that two birds could be stumen. So we're in the last line here. Amalei Hassam, so Rav Sim bar Ashi is saying, no. My question is better than your answer. Hassam v'lokach v'asa amar Rachmana. Iba kichas ba'alam, iba siyas kayan. Either the owner, the one who needs the atonement, determines which animals which when he buys them, v'lokach, or when the kayan performs it, the kayan decides. Ba'asiyas kayan, that's be v'asa.
27b now, Rabbi?
27a, the last two words of the line. 1 second. However, in the scenario of Rabbi Gamliel, you have three animals. Can you decide that a different animal should be the chatas or a different animal should be the ayla? No, you can't, because there's only one animal that's eligible for chatas, one animal that's eligible for an ayla. Here's one's an animal, one's in a keva, one's a male, one's a female. So therefore, because there's no other option, obviously it's considered mifuroshin. Because it's so obvious, that's considered as if it's specified. But the truth be told is that you're right. I do prefer an explanation that says that live animals that weren't specified are considered stumen. It's only that your scenario that you proved from, which is the scenario of Rabbi Gamliel, the guy that you can't say that that's stumen because there's no options there. The only option is to choose the obvious one for the chatas, the obvious one for the oil, the obvious one for the shlomim, because they're specified. So, okay. So now in terms of the shakavatari of the Gemara, in terms of the flow of the Gemara, we're at the point where Rav Simi bar Ashi, Rav Simi the son of Rav Ashi, has a very strong question on the previous Gemara. Again, previous Gemara said stumen is a very limited category, right? Only money, basically, or blemished animals. And now Rav Simi bar Ashi cracks it open. He says, no, there's a lot more here. It's also any animal, even if it's fit for sacrifice, which runs contrary to the first Gemara that we saw yesterday. Mm-hmm. And now Rav Simi bar Ashi ends the question with the upper hand, right? Rav Simi bar Ashi is saying that I've proven from you that two birds are stumen, two live birds that are fit for sacrifice are considered stumen. And that seems to be the logical preference. Unspecified. That seems to be the logical preference. So I'm sort of I'm on the upper side of the argument now. Now, the Gemara does not hold that Rav Simi bar Ashi's question is so powerful enough to vindicate him. So in other words, we have a machlokes here. Rav Simi bar Ashi says it's stumen, and Rav Nachman and a few others, two Rav Nachmans previously, they say no, stumen's much more limited. But this argument alone isn't enough to vindicate. And the Gemara continues with other possibilities. We'll see one for sure today, and then probably the other one will probably wait for tomorrow. Okay. So on the second line of Zayin and Beis, Masav Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna had the following question: Mi amrinan behema balas mum kestumadamya. Do we consider a blemished animal to be stumen? Tashma, let's examine this. This is not typical of the Gemara. It's more like the terminology of Nazir is a little bit different than other Mesechtas, which is what Tashma is typically not. It's typically not a Masav and then a Tashma, but okay. Regardless, so the Gemara has a question. So what's the question? Keitzad Amru, the Brisa says, Keitzad Amru Ish Megalech al Naziris Aviv. Okay, there's an interesting concept which we'll get to. Yep, well, it's a Mishnah actually. It's a Mishnah that a person can use the karbonos his father sanctified. Typically, this is not the case. You can't use somebody else's sacrifices. Mm-hmm. In the case of a son and a father, where the son's Naziris was accepted after the father died in place of the father, it's a unique category. And we'll learn about it more, Mirza Shem, God willing, on Wednesday. Okay. Bisman Shahaya Aviv Nazir. His father became a Nazir. V'hifresh Aviv. V'hifresh Aviv Mois Naziris. Zirusai. I'm skipping a few words. It's a little bit. They changed the text a little bit over here. So the father was a Nazir. He finishes Nazirus. He separated Karbonis, Umeis, and then he dies before he has a chance to bring the Karbonis. Va'amar, the son says, Hareini Nazir almanas shagaleach almois abo. I'm a Nazir on condition that I use my father's sacrifices. Okay, in that scenario, ein zeh megalech almois aviv. That's not a scenario where he can use his father's sacrifices. That scenario he cannot use his father's sacrifices. However, one second. If his father had unspecified funds, they go to Oyel's Kayetz Mizbeach. If he had specified animals, so what do you do? Chatos Thomas, the Korban Chatos is killed. Oyel to Korf. Oyel Shlam Yikruv Shlam. The oil is brought as an oil and the Shlam as a Shlam. Okay. And those Korbanos he is able to use. Ma'alav afilu balas mum. Presumably, even if these sacrifices were blemished, the son can still not use them. Why? Because a blemished animal is considered like a blemished animal is considered specified, and therefore, in other words, the chatos, whether it is fit for sacrifice or whether it's blemished, neither way can it be used. In both scenarios, it's killed. Why? That's the Gemara's presumption. And therefore, we see that a balmum, a blemished animal, is considered mifuroshin and not stumen, which runs counter to one of the opinions in the previous Gemara we saw yesterday. Okay. So Gemara says, no, not convincing. Light tmimo, it's talking about a unblemished animal. Okay, avabalas moment, but a blemished animal. What's the halacha? Kastuma damir. That's in other words, if the father has a chatas that's fit for sacrifice, can't use it, kill it. Fine. If the father has an animal that's blemished, then what's the halacha? Sell it, and you can use the money. The money goes to Nadav because it's considered unspecified. Avabalas moment, kastuma damir. It's considered stuman. It's considered unspecified. The Gemara says, if that's the case, my area mois, why does the Mishnah need to give an example of money? In other words, the guy's father left him unspecified money, put it to Kayetz HaMizbeach. Oilos Kayetz HaMizbeach. Why couldn't it say the guy's father left him animals that were sanctified, but they were bali mumen, they were blemished? Because that's the same thing as money. So the Gemara says, we'll see the Gemara in a moment, but effectively the Gemara's conclusion is you're right. They are the same thing, and there's no difference, because what is a balmum? A balmum is monetary equivalent. It's an item of value that you're going to sell. It's the same thing as money, and therefore is no proof. Why do we specifically need to talk about money? Why can we say that an animal that's a balmum should be brought as a gift? So Gemara says, you're right. Hachanami balas mum l'maikadisha. What's the sanctification of a balmum, of an animal with a blemish? There's no actual sanctification because you can't bring it as a sacrifice. What's the sanctification? Rather, l'dami, for the value. Dami hainu mois. That's value is money. Same thing. The father leaves him a pile of money. It's the same as leaving him a pile of blemished animals. Okay. We'll start the next Gemara, but we won't finish it. The next Gemara features an almost identical structure as the previous question. The Gemara's question basically is going to be exactly the same question. The Gemara is going to presume that a balmum is the same as a sanctified animal, right? And we see that a sanctified animal that a balmum is considered specified, like a sanctified animal is considered specified. And the Gemara's conclusion is no, exactly the same conclusion. Balmum is different. It's considered like money. Why doesn't it mention instead of money? Because it is money, because it's the same thing. It's effectively the same question. However, the Gemara goes on a long detour to get there. We'll start the detour today. Okay. But, we'll start another 2 minutes. But one before we get on there. Okay. So just keep in mind for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have a full size daf, so we won't have time to spend 20 minutes reviewing the previous daf. So keep in mind, try to review it a little bit and keep in mind where we're holding the Gemara's question here. The Gemara is trying to ask a question on the balmum component. So we say that stumen includes bali mumen. The Gemara is rejecting that assumption. The Gemara feels that stumen that a balmum, a blemished animal, is considered specified. That's really what the question is on.
We're pretty much on schedule. So it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's stop. I'm just finish off. Okay, so let's
Go
just
ahead, yeah.
no. I'm just going to review what we saw today and structure it, and then tomorrow we'll see what we're talking about tomorrow and see this. So it's actually a very easy Gemara, but it's just very long. Okay, so it's one question from here until effectively finish. It's about an Amud long question. Okay, so what did we see? We saw yesterday Shabbos. We saw that stumin is a very limited category. It includes money and blemished animals, and it excludes, according to different opinions, either animals fit for sacrifice, even though those animals are not fit for the specific appropriate sacrifice. So, for example, a guy takes 3 bulls, none of which are appropriate for the sacrifices of an Nazir, the korbanos of an Nazir. So he sanctifies these 3. He takes 3 bulls. Those 3 bulls are considered specified. Also, the same would be true if he has bars of gold or of bullion, and if he has beams. He sanctifies those for korbanos. Those are considered specified. And yesterday we saw the reason for taisis is because they are illiquid markets, take a long time to sell. Today we dropped that explanation, we went with Rashi's explanation. It has to be similar to money, and these are not similar to money. And why is it to be similar to money? Because that's what the whole concept is. The idea that there's a concept of mois tum and yipul nadava, where unspecified money could go to an ayla, is learned from money, and it's learned from money. So it has to be very similar to money. The Gemara had a question: what about birds? Birds are fit for sacrifice, and you see they're considered stumin. The Gemara says, "Hold on, you mean to say every korban is stumin?" The Gemara says, "No. I mean to say that most korbanos are stumin, except if it's obvious that it can't be stumin, because the types of korbanos are only appropriate to specific types of sacrifices. But otherwise, yeah, I prefer saying that all korbanos, even the ones that are fit for sacrifice, are considered stumin or could be considered stumin." Okay, and that question really is the Gemara remains with it as an open question. Then the Gemara sidetracks, and this is we're middle of now, which is the issue of Bali Mumin. Are blemished animals considered equivalent of money, effectively unspecified, or are they considered specified? The Gemara tried to prove from the scenario of which we'll learn in Wednesday, Mirz Hashem, God willing, that about a guy taking over his father's naziris in some way, which we'll see on Wednesday. The implication seems to be that Bali Mumin could be considered specified. The Gemara says no, Bali Mumin are actually considered unspecified, just like money, and they're exactly like money. And the next question will be on the same category of Bali Mumin being stumin. We'll leave it at that for today, and that's where we'll continue tomorrow. Okay. Have a great day.
You too.